guys, welcome to Man Medicine, where we talk about how men can optimize their health and escape the collapsing U.S. healthcare system. So today I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit about red yeast rice for lowering cholesterol. I fielded a couple questions about this from a patient just a couple weeks ago, so I thought I would share what I shared with them with you, so you can decide if this is something that you want to entertain. So most of what I'm going to tell you today comes from this article here. It's in the journal Nutrients. This is a 2023 article, Red Yeast Rice for the Improvement of Lipid Profiles in Mild to Moderate Hypercholesterolemia and Narrative Review. So what is red yeast rice? Well, this is what it looks like here. It's got this nice auburn red color, and it's been used for centuries, mainly in the Far East, for its pigment properties. But it was discovered in the last century that it actually has some, modestly decent lipid lowering effects, and that comes mainly from the fermentation of this Monascus purpureus yeast onto white rice. So what I'm showing you there is the finished product that actually started off as just regular white rice. You add in this fungus or yeast to it, you let it ferment for a while, and then not only do you get these various pigments, but you get some biologically active compounds called monocalins. There's monocalin K, L, and J. They all have lipid lowering properties. There are several other like bioflavonoids and other compounds that may also have biological activity that we don't really have time to get into. But the one we're going to focus on is this monocalin K, because that's the one that is the most prevalent of all the monocalins and is the one responsible for most of the lipid lowering effect that we see with red yeast rice. So who should use this stuff? Well, not surprisingly, the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology, when they put out their lipid lowering guidelines in 2019, they didn't mention red yeast rice at all. The European guidelines, though, the European Society of Cardiology, the European Atherosclerosis Society, they put out guidelines in 2019, which were fairly similar, but they actually did mention it there. And then the International Lipid Expert Panel, which put out recommendations as well, they mentioned it as well. And both of those groups said roughly the same thing, and it's shown here on this little pie chart here. This is from the International Lipid Expert Panel, but there's a few categories of patients that could consider using this stuff if they want to, and basically it comes down to otherwise healthy individuals who have mild to moderate lipid issues that they cannot seem to correct with diet and lifestyle interventions. So this is not intended for people with very serious lipid disturbances, especially, for example, people with FH, familial hyperlipidemia, people that have advanced coronary artery disease, if you had a stent, prior heart attack, stroke, a bypass. They do not recommend it for those individuals, but it certainly could be considered if you have just relatively mild lipid perturbations and you are not at whatever LDL goal you and your doctor want you to be at, then you could totally consider this, and it's they consider it to be not an unreasonable thing. Now, there's other groups of people that may want to use this as well, and there are people who are just ideologically opposed to taking prescription drugs for any reason, and so sometimes they feel better about taking a quote natural product, and that might be a way for them to do that and still get some of the benefits of prescription statin medications. It's funny because a lot of those same people I've noticed, at least in online forums, will often be the loudest in terms of shouting about how statins are poisons, and that you should use red yeast rice instead. And I have to say, bro, you are taking a statin, because monocalin K, as I'm going to show you here, this is the chemical structure, monocolin K. It's found in two forms. So there's a lactone form and then this hydroxy acid form. So the lactone form is the inactive form. It gets converted in the body to the hydroxy acid form. Well, the lactone form, this chemical structure, that is identical to lovastatin. So lovastatin was one of the very first statins that was introduced to the market many, many years ago. I don't recall how long ago. It hardly ever gets used anymore because it's just not very potent. Certainly the newer generation statins that are out there are far more potent than this, and generally considered to be more effective, but I think it's, you could still prescribe this stuff. I've never actually prescribed lovastatin because I just have never had to. But monocolin K, the lactone form at least, that is lovastatin. So this is just important to understand if you weren't aware previously. When you use red yeast rice to lower your cholesterol, you are taking actually several naturally occurring statins, one of which is biologically identical to lovastatin, which is a prescription drug. Okay, so just because you're taking something natural doesn't mean that you're not taking some sort of biologically active drug. It just happens that Big Pharma extracted this and made lovastatin out of it. So all of the same caveats apply when you're taking red yeast rice that apply as if you were taking a prescription statin. So you still have to be careful about the same drug-drug interactions. So, we know about drinking grapefruit juice is a no-no while you're on a statin, at least around the same time. It can skew the levels of the statin upward, so increasing your chances of toxicity. Same exact thing applies with red yeast rice. You don't want to be taking St. John's wort necessarily at the same time as your statin. It can actually lower the effects of the lovastatin or monocolin K from the red yeast rice. All statins lower coenzyme Q, so you may want to consider supplementing with that. Interestingly enough, when I was doing a little research for this talk, I was looking at the various Amazon products, the red yeast rice products that were out there, and a lot of them now come with CoQ10 already compounded in, so it's like a dual product. So the manufacturers have caught on to that, and they're aware that consumers know that, and so they're combining the products. So that's kind of interesting. So just keep in mind, it's the same issues that can come up with prescription lovastatin, for example, are the same issues that could potentially arise with red yeast rice. Having said that, we won't have time to go into all of the studies on this, but even though some of the same side effects are still present with red yeast rice, they do seem to be, at least based on the studies that I pulled, they seem to be a little less frequent. So for whatever reason, whether it's nocebo/placebo, whatever the case may be, people who don't tolerate prescription statins seem to be able to tolerate red yeast rice a little bit better. So again, the other group of people that may want to consider this are people that they've been intolerant of one or more prescription statins. The studies seem to indicate that they might do a little bit better. They might be better able to tolerate red yeast rice instead. So that's another reason to maybe consider this as something for people, again, with mild to moderate lipid issues. And I say mild to moderate because you're not going to get the same kind of drastic LDL lowering that you would with an equivalent amount of Crestor or rosuvastatin, for example, or Lipitor, atorvastatin. So you're looking at, like, again, it depends on the study that you pull, LDL lowering 20 to 25%, which, it's nothing to sneeze at. Total cholesterol drops 18 to 20%. You'll get some drop in your triglycerides. It's about 15%. Not super impressive, but depending on where you're starting, that might be all that you need to get yourself into a lower cardiovascular risk category. So it's this is not something that I jump to, but it is something that's, let's just say, it's on the menu for many individuals as something that they could consider. Now, I mentioned that it, in some studies, seems to be better tolerated than prescription statins, but that doesn't mean that this stuff is side effect free. So this is a 2020 article, British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology. It is red yeast rice supplements case series assessment of spontaneously reported cases to the Netherlands Pharmacovigilance Center at Lareb. Okay, so basically what they did here is they investigated 187 adverse event reports allegedly related to red yeast rice. They investigated those 187. They found that 94 of them were credible, and the rest just didn't make sense, or there was something else going on. So, not surprisingly, musculoskeletal complaints, so arthralgias, myalgias, aches and pains, maybe joint and tendon issues, that was by far the most common. They got it at 34%. So, consistent with statin medications as well. So, gastrointestinal disorders of various kinds. So, it could be abdominal pain, it could be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, anything GI related was reported in 18% of those cases. General complaints, so kind of non-specific stuff, maybe fatigue, malaise, stuff that maybe they couldn't quite put their finger on, was about 12%. Nervous system disorders, so that could be anything from numbness, weakness, paresthesias, anxiety, etc., in 9%. However, of these 94 that were confirmed to be likely due to red yeast rice, there were actually 6 of them that ended up being kind of serious. And 3 of the 6 were people who were admitted to the hospital with acute pancreatitis, which is inflammation of the pancreas, which in some cases can be very mild and occasionally managed as an outpatient, but also can very easily land you in the ICU and make you critically ill. I've seen that on a number of occasions. I see a lot of pancreatitis in the hospital. Usually it's alcohol or gallstone related, but there are reported cases of it with this red yeast rice. Not surprisingly, there were also 2 cases of rhabdomyolysis, okay, which is a much more serious case where you have diffuse muscle breakdown and death of myocytes and leaking of all sorts of evil humors out of muscle cells that can lead to renal failure, potentially very serious. And then there was 1 case of acute hepatic failure, which shouldn't be too surprising because statins are metabolized by cytochromes in the liver, and certainly there are patients out there that will have elevation of their liver enzymes, AST and ALT, particularly with statins, and can be one of the reasons why they don't tolerate statins is because of liver enzyme elevations, especially when they're combined with other medications. That's typically where I've seen it, where back in the day, if we put somebody on a statin and they were put on a fibrate or they're put on a statin plus niacin, for example, then we'd in some cases start seeing those liver enzymes trending up, and then we'd have to back off and maybe take away one of those medications. So that shouldn't be too surprising. But the point is, just because something is natural doesn't mean it's not potentially associated with, in some cases, very serious side effects. So you just have to be aware of that. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it can't hurt you. Well, the other thing that's important to know about is that the supplement industry, especially in the United States, it's a little bit like the Wild West. It's not as regulated as many people think it is. What you see on a label isn't necessarily what's actually in the bottle, and it can be very difficult to tease out which products are good, which ones are not. The FDA has mandated that these red yeast rice products change their labeling, and they did that back in the 90s. There was a product called Colestin, and at the time, Colestin, which was a standard red yeast rice supplement, it was being marketed. They marketed it as, so they made 2 mistakes according to the FDA. One, they were making claims that it treated a specific health condition, so high cholesterol. So they're blatantly saying it would lower cholesterol. So now what they do is they say it supports healthy cholesterol. So they don't outright say it treats high cholesterol, but they were saying it back in the 90s. And then the other thing they were doing is they were actually listing the amount of lovastatin or monocolin K on the label, so that presumably you could make it, you knew what you were getting. Well, they said, no, you can't do that. You're selling an unapproved prescription drug and you're making these health claims. That's not allowed. So this is what the labels look like these days. I pulled this off just some random product on Amazon. So what you'll see here, serving size 2 capsules. It just says red yeast rice powder, 1,200 milligrams, which, by the way, seems to be the standard dose that most supplements contain. They consider this to be the therapeutic dose, 1,200 milligrams. But you have no idea how much monocolin K, L, J. You don't know any of the bioflavonoids. You don't know what's in this 1,200 milligrams. And as I'm going to show you here in this study, this is from the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. entitled Variability in Strength of Red Yeast Rice Supplements Purchased from Mainstream Retailers. So we're going to see here the amount of monocalin K slash lovastatin varies widely from product to product. And there's no way to tell unless these are independently tested. We'll talk about that here in a second. So in this particular study, they looked at 28 brands and that were purchased off of like major retail chains, so probably places like GNC, et cetera. And they studied them. So 2 of the 28 had no monocalin K in them whatsoever. So you'd be taking this stuff and you're wondering, well, why is my cholesterol not any better? Well, it's because it doesn't have any of the active ingredient in it, none. But the other 26 varied widely. So there was a 60-fold difference between the product with the least amount and the product with the most. So, and again, all of these were labeled as 1,200 milligrams of red yeast rice extract. So the lowest one, I think, what did it say here? It said it had 0.09 milligrams of lovastatin, and the highest one had 5.48 milligrams of lovastatin per 1,200 milligrams of red yeast rice. So highly variable, highly variable. So you just don't know, and you can't tell by looking at the bottle. And they don't, the FDA actually kind of did us a disservice in some ways by not allowing them to at least put that on the label. They're not allowed to do it anymore in North America. Now that might not be the case in other countries. So if you're watching this and you live in Europe or Asia or Africa, anywhere in the Middle East, and you have access to this nutritional supplement, which I think most places do, yeah, let me know in the comment section if the products that you have access to over there actually list any of the other ingredients on there other than red yeast rice extract. I'd be curious to know if that's the case, because that certainly can help you make at least a better decision in terms of the products that you buy. But when you go into GNC, I mean, there's just no way to tell. So I'm a big fan of this website, consumerlab.com, and this is not a sponsored video or anything like that, but I've had a membership to this site for a number of years. I highly recommend if you guys are interested in looking at independent supplement analysis, this is a great website. They independently test all sorts of supplements, from protein powders to red yeast rice, fish oil, etc. And I've been surprised over the years at the number of products that have failed these independent tests that do not contain what is listed on the label. It's actually kind of disappointing, but it's actually very common. So they, a couple of years ago, tested a number of these red yeast rice products, and this is what they found. So these are them listed here, just a few of the ones that they tested. And you can see the one that they recommended as the highest quality is this HPF cholesterol, and this is what it looks like here. And so this one, per 1,200 milligrams of extract, had 7.5 milligrams of lovastatin. Nature's Plus red yeast rice came in second at 3.4. You can see several of these as we get down here had almost none. This Puritan's Pride had 0.16. Arazo Nutrition, Vitacost, no detectable lovastatin in either one of those. But here's the thing that's concerning to me, and I was not aware of this until relatively recently, but many of these products have not inconsequential amounts of a particular mycotoxin. So a mycotoxin is a poison made by a fungus, in this case the red yeast rice, that is particularly, at least in animal studies in the lab, it's considered a nephrotoxin, meaning it's poisonous to your kidneys. It's associated with birth defects in animals. There's no good studies that I could find on humans, so we don't really know what the long-term effect of exposure to human beings is with this stuff. And you do come into contact with this stuff in other products. So certainly like certain grain products that have been stored for long periods of time can accumulate this mycotoxin. So it's just something to be aware of. And they tested for it in this consumer lab study. You can see here that 3 of the products had detectable amounts of this stuff. And in particular, the one that was the worst was this 21st century red yeast rice, had 8.6 micrograms per serving, which is by far the highest. But you can see a couple of the other ones there did as well. And so that's a little bit concerning. So some of these products, the bottom 2, not only do they have no lovastatin, so no active ingredient to speak of, but they were had fairly high concentrations of this nephrotoxin. So, no thanks. I think I'll pass on that one. The other thing that they found here was in this chart is that so even their top product that they said had the highest concentration, this HPF cholesterol product, when they tested it over the years, I mean, it varied year by year in terms of the concentration of lovastatin. So from batch to batch, there's going to be a lot of variability in these products. They're not made with the same quality control as prescription pharmaceutical drugs. That's just the nature of the supplement industry. So from batch to batch, there's going to be, in some cases, pretty wide variability. So look, in 2014, the batch that they tested had 12.6 milligrams of lovastatin. They tested again in 2018, it was down to 6.4 milligrams. And then back in 2022, most recently, it was up to 7.5 milligrams. So major swings in the lovastatin content. And it's the same with all the other products, highly variable. So again, that's what I was saying. It's a little bit like the Wild West in the supplement industry. It's like, who do you trust? And that's where this Consumer Lab website comes in, I think, very handy, because for a small fee, you can get access to all of their independent testing and, not spend your hard-earned money on products that don't contain the ingredients that they say that they contain. And I've been surprisingly common how many of these products don't live up to their labels in terms of what their active ingredients are. It's kind of disappointing that there's such widespread dishonesty, I should say, in the supplement industry. So, getting back to the citrulline, that's the mycotoxin I was talking about. So again, the effects on humans are not well characterized. I don't know that we'll ever have good studies on that. It would probably be somewhat unethical to do studies like that. But the European Food Safety Authority has established what they consider to be a safe upper limit per day of this stuff. You're not supposed to go above this, and it's 0.2 micrograms per kilo per day. So probably a somewhat arbitrary number that is likely just an educated guess from a bunch of food scientists and toxicologists, but I don't know, sounds reasonable to me. What's a little bit frightening is that in another study that I found, this 2021 study, they looked at 37 of these, red yeast rice supplement products that were available to the public, and only one of them had citrulline levels below that. So 36 of the 37, if you took it as prescribed, would exceed what they consider to be the safe upper limit of this particular renally toxic mycotoxin. So that's a little bit concerning to me. And again, there's no way to know that based off just looking at the label. So, and again, it's buyer beware, buyer beware. The final thing I'll touch on is one of the arguments for using red yeast rice is that statin medications are more expensive, and that may have been the case in the past, but now it's pretty much a wash. All statin medications that are currently available in the U.S. are off patent, so they're very inexpensive. This is a sample from GoodRx of some of the local big chain pharmacies in my local area, and this is for 30 days of rosuvastatin or Crestor. And you can see the prices are pretty variable. Safeway's got some good ones, a good deal going, $8.23 for a 30-day supply. Yeah, don't go to Walgreens out here. It's $197, which is kind of outrageous. And again, this is the cash price. This is no insurance. For 60 days of this HPF product that Consumer Lab rated as containing the most lovastatin, you're looking at about $19, give or take. Not including like shipping and handling and stuff if you order this stuff online. So you can see, it compares favorably to if you just double that Safeway price, you're going to get, roughly the same, you're going to spend the same amount of money. The thing is, obviously, the rosuvastatin is going to have a substantially bigger effect on your lipid profile, on your inflammatory markers, on all of the so-called pleiotropic effects that you get from statins than this red yeast rice stuff. Because again, lovastatin is a weak statin. It's compared to the other, especially the more modern, newer generation statins, it just pales in comparison in terms of what it does to your lipid parameters, inflammatory markers, etc. So, the cost argument may have been valid many years ago, but it's not. I don't think it just doesn't hold any water right now, and so that's not a good reason necessarily to use it. Now that might be different in other countries, so let me know if you guys. I know I have a lot of international listeners, and I always love hearing from you guys because you give different perspectives on some of the stuff that I see here in North America. Yeah, if your prices for statins might be a lot different than they are here. So that's all I had for you guys today on this stuff. Again, I don't try to talk people out of trying this sort of stuff. I just think you just need to be educated and understand some of the risks and limitations that are out there when you use nutritional supplements. I think I agree with the European guidelines. If you have, relatively mild to moderate issues with your lipids, but you're otherwise healthy, it's a reasonable thing to try. If you've been intolerant of multiple prescription statins, certainly you could give this stuff a try. Just make sure you get a good product that you can confirm independently, hopefully from a third-party source, that it actually contains what you think it contains. Because you don't want to, even though these are, again, they're not very expensive, you don't want to be spending money on something that doesn't have any active ingredients in it, or something that has a mycotoxin in it and doesn't have any active ingredients in it. Now, if you have known coronary artery disease, if you've had a cardiovascular event of some kind, if you've got stents, if you've had a bypass, I think my recommendation would be to use one of the prescription high potency statins. I think you're probably going to need the benefits of a much more potent statin and the reliability that every time you take that, you're getting the same amount of drug per dose. You don't want to be going, you don't 1 month have a certain amount of lovastatin from your red yeast rice, and the next month it's different, and then you switch brands, and now it's different again. You just want to have that consistency if you're one of these people that's in a higher risk category. And the fact is that, based on the new lipid guidelines that are out there, if you've got known obstructive coronary disease and you need to get your LDL down into the 50s, for example, depending on where you start, it's unlikely that red yeast rice is going to get you there, at least in and of itself. And you're going to either need to use a prescription statin, or you're going to need to add one or more other prescription medications into your regimen if you're going to use red yeast rice in order to meet those goals. Talk to your cardiologist, your lipidologist, your primary care physician about that kind of stuff. But it's this stuff is an option. It's just not a great option in my opinion. But certainly, if you want to try it, and I do have patients that take this, I certainly don't. I don't try to steer them away from it unless they're in that really high risk group, and I say that's for you, it's probably not a great idea, but for other people, I don't think there's a major problem in at least giving it a try. Just make sure you're getting a good product, which is like, it's hard. You don't always know. So again, that's all I have for you guys today. If you have experience with red yeast rice, I would love to hear about it, either positive or negative. I've never taken this stuff. I have no intention of ever taking it. I'm going to stick to my 10 milligrams of rosuvastatin, which I've been taking now for a little while with no issues, and that's what I'm going to use. But that does not mean that you have to do that. So let me know what your experience has been with this stuff. I would love to hear from you guys, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.
All Man Medicine video and audio has been created and shared online for informational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute the practice of medicine or professional healthcare services of any kind, including the giving of medical advice. I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship has been established. This content is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied upon solely for that purpose either. The only purpose of this content is to present peer-reviewed, research-backed health information for your consideration. As always, rely on the advice and guidance of your personal physician before undertaking any activity presented here, and if in doubt or not comfortable with said activity, practice discretion. Your health is your responsibility and not ours. Finally, I take conflicts of interest seriously. I accept no compensation whatsoever from any private corporations, including pharmaceutical or supplement companies. You can trust that if I recommend a medication, product, or service, it's because I genuinely believe in it and not because I'm being paid to endorse it.